My grandmother's house always held secrets. Finding them in the attic, though, was something I never thought would happen. Not like this. Elias Webb is my name. It's been 3 weeks since my grandmother passed away. She was 92 years old, the last of her generation in our family. Or so I had always believed. Most of my childhood summers were spent in this house, listening to grand stories about growing up in the small coastal town of Blackwater Cove. My mother had moved us to the city when I was just a baby. But every June, we'd make the 4-hour drive back to what Mom always called the old country. Nearly a decade had passed since I'd last been back. Grant and I kept in touch through weekly phone calls, but life has a way of filling up with excuses: too busy with work, too expensive to travel, always a promise to visit next month. Until suddenly, no more months remain. The funeral was small. Just me, my mother, and a handful of elderly neighbors who remembered the vibrant woman Gran had once been. Mom couldn't stay to help with the house, she said. Her arthritis was acting up. But I knew the real reason. For her, this place held too many memories, too many ghosts. So, the task of sorting through 92 years of a life well lived fell to me, to decide what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. For 2 weeks I'd already been at it, and I had barely made a dent. It wasn't until Gran's personal papers that I started going through that I realized how little I actually knew about her life. Birth certificate, marriage license, deed to the house, all the official documents of a person's existence, filed away in manila folders inside a fireproof box under her bed. That's when I found it. The key. Small, brass, ornate, the kind you'd use for a jewelry box or a diary. Nothing was written on it, no label to indicate what it might open. But it felt important, something about it. The better part of a day I spent trying that key in every lock I could find: the writing desk in the study, the jewelry box on Gran's dresser, even the antique cabinet in the dining room where she kept her good china. Nothing fit. I was about to give up when the attic came to mind. In all my summers here, up there was a place I'd never once been. Grant had always kept it locked, telling me it was just storage. Nothing interesting. Just old memories gathering dust, she'd say, changing the subject whenever I asked about it. The ladder creaked under my weight as I climbed. Each step was an announcement of my intrusion into a space that had remained undisturbed for years. Thick and stale was the air, heavy with the scent of old paper and forgotten things. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, something that might fit the key in my pocket, something that might tell me more about the grandmother I thought I knew. Hours of searching it took. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the floorboards. I was about to call it a day when I spotted it. An old steamer trunk pushed into the farthest corner of the attic, half hidden beneath a faded quilt. Perfectly the key slid in. With a satisfying click, the lock turned. Dozens of letters were inside the trunk. Yellowed envelopes tied together with faded ribbon, neatly arranged in bundles. On top was a leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle with age. The journal belonged to Gran. The pages were filled with her familiar handwriting. But it wasn't a diary in the traditional sense. It was more like a record. Names, dates, addresses, family members I'd never heard of, cousins, aunts, uncles, an entire branch of our family tree that had somehow been erased from our history. According to Gran's notes, she hadn't been an only child, as she'd always claimed. She'd had 2 sisters and a brother. My great-aunts and great-uncle. People who should have been part of my life, part of our family story. People whose names had never once been mentioned in all the summers the first spent in this house. With trembling fingers, I untied the first bundle of letters. There were 12 envelopes addressed to Gran at this very house. Different handwriting was on each one. Different return addresses from all over the country. But as I turned them over one by one, a chill ran down my spine. They were all postmarked with the exact same date. March 15, 1972. Every single one. Bundle after bundle I went through. Dozens of letters all addressed to Gran. All from different people, these forgotten relatives and others whose names didn't appear in the journal. All postmarked March 15, 1972. What had happened on that day? Why would so many people write to my grandmother on the exact same day? And why had she kept these letters hidden away for nearly 50 years? With a deep breath, the first letter I opened. The paper was thin, delicate. The ink was faded, but still legible. It was from someone named Margaret Sullivan, apparently my grandmother's older sister. My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, then it's happened. The thing we've feared all these years. I felt it starting last night. That familiar pull like the tide going out. By the time you receive this letter, I'll be gone. Just like Mother. Just like all the others who came before us. I don't have much time, so I'll be brief. You were right to leave Blackwater Cove all those years ago. Right to cut ties with the family. Right to protect your daughter from our legacy. I should have done the same. My only comfort is knowing that you survived, that you found a way to break the cycle. Keep this letter as proof that I existed, that I loved you, but burn everything else. Don't look for answers, Kathy. Some questions shouldn't be asked. All my love, your sister, Margaret. My hands were shaking as I set down the letter. Gran's name was Catherine. Catherine Eleanor Webb. I'd been named after her, taking my middle name from hers, but I'd never heard her called Kathy, and I'd certainly never heard of any Margaret Sullivan. The second letter was from Robert Webb, Gran's brother, according to the journal. His handwriting was messy, hurried, as if he'd been in a great rush. Kathy, it's starting. The dreams came first, just like Father described. Then the marks appeared on my wrists this morning. Eleanor experienced it 2 years ago. Now we're the only ones left. I've made arrangements for the children. They'll be safe with Eleanor's husband's family in Arizona. Far from the water, far from this cursed place. I've tried calling, but your line's been disconnected. I hope this reaches you in time. Stay away from Blackwater Cove. Stay away from the water. It's hungry, Kathy. It remembers our family. If you've truly found a way to break free, to protect yourself and your daughter, then there's hope. Tell no one about us, forget we existed, it's the only way, your brother, Robert. Every letter contains similar warnings, cryptic references to some kind of family curse or legacy, mentions of the water and the tide and the pull. Each writer seemed convinced they were about to die or disappear, and each one congratulated Gran on somehow escaping their fate. In that attic I stayed until dawn, reading letter after letter, trying to piece together the mystery. According to the dates in Gran's journal, every person who had written to her on March 15, 1972, had died or disappeared on that same day. All of them across the country. My grandmother's entire extended family gone in a single day. But why? What could possibly have happened to an entire family spread across different states on the same day? Some letters mentioned illness, others accidents. A few referred to the calling or the tide, as if the writers expected to be taken by some supernatural force. And through it all, one thing was clear. Gran had somehow escaped whatever fate had befallen the rest of her family. She'd left Blackwater Cove as a young woman, changed her name from Catherine Sullivan to Catherine Webb when she married my grandfather, and never looked back. So thoroughly she had hidden her past that even her own daughter, my mother, knew nothing of these relatives. I didn't know what to make of it all. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as the shared delusion of a troubled family. Mental illness can run in bloodlines, after all. Perhaps they had all suffered from the same paranoia, the same dark fantasies. But something about those letters felt too real, too urgent, and there were too many coincidences. How could dozens of people scattered across the country all die or disappear on the exact same day? And why had Gran been so careful to erase all evidence of their existence from our family history? Answers I needed, and I knew where to start looking. Blackwater Cove hadn't changed much since my childhood summers. Still the same quaint New England fishing village with its weathered docks and salt-worn buildings. Tourism had brought some new development, a couple of bed and breakfasts, an artisanal coffee shop on the main street. But the heart of the town remained untouched by time. If I wanted to learn more about my family's history in this town, the local historical society seemed like the logical place to start. Small towns have long memories, and Blackwater Cove had been established in the 1700s. Surely, there would be records, newspaper archives, something to shed light on the Sullivan family and whatever tragedy might have befallen them. The librarian looked up as I entered, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag read Martha Pearson. "Can I help you find something, dear?" she asked, setting aside the book she'd been reading. "I hope so. I'm researching my family history." The Sullivans. They lived here until the early 1950s, I believe. Martha's expression shifted from polite interest to something more guarded. "Sullivan, you say? I don't recall any Sullivans in Blackwater Cove. Are you sure you have the right town?" "Yes, I'm certain. My grandmother was Catherine Sullivan before she married. She grew up here with her siblings, Margaret, Robert, and Elizabeth. Their parents were Thomas and Eleanor Sullivan." Martha's hands had gone still on the desk. "What did you say your name was, dear?" "Elias Webb. Catherine was my grandmother." She studied my face intently. "You have the look of her around the eyes." She seemed to come to a decision, nodding slightly. "The Sullivan records aren't in our public archives, but I might be able to help you. Come back tomorrow morning. I need to make some calls." That wasn't the response I'd expected. Why would information about my family be excluded from the public archives? And why did Martha need to make some calls before helping me? The rest of the day I spent familiarizing myself with the town. It was smaller than I remembered, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shopkeepers paused in their work to stare as I passed. Conversations halted when I entered the local diner for lunch. I tried approaching a few locals, casually mentioning I was researching the Sullivan family. The reactions were all variations on the same theme, blank stares followed by claims that no Sullivans had ever lived in Blackwater Cove followed by sudden urgent reasons to be elsewhere. By nightfall, I was thoroughly unsettled. Either the entire town was engaged in some bizarre conspiracy of silence about my family, or Gran had been lying about her origins all along. Neither possibility made much sense. I'd brought copies of some of the letters and pages from Gran's journal. Reading through them again, I noticed something I'd missed before. Many of the letters made reference to the tide pool, the stones, and the ceremony. One letter from Gran's youngest sister, Elizabeth, mentioned something called the Sullivan Pact. "Do you remember the Sullivan Pact, Kathy? How Father would take us to the tide pool on our 16th birthdays. How he'd make us place our hands on the black stones and recite those terrible words. Blood to water, flesh to salt, soul to depths until the last. I've done my best to forget, but the dreams won't let me. The voices in the water calling my name. It's almost time. The pact demands its payment." What kind of ceremony had my great-grandfather performed with his children? What was this Sullivan Pact? And what did it have to do with the mass disappearance of my extended family in 1972? I couldn't sleep that night. Outside my window, I could hear the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore. Blackwater Cove was nestled in a natural harbor, protected from the worst of the Atlantic's fury by a curved peninsula of rocky cliffs. Those cliffs had featured prominently in Gran stories, tales of shipwrecks and smugglers carefully scrubbed of any personal connection. The dream began with the sound of water. Not the gentle lapping of waves I'd been hearing all day, but a deeper, more resonant sound like water moving through vast hidden spaces, caves beneath the earth, chambers of the heart. I was floating, suspended in cold darkness. Yet somehow I could breathe. Somehow I could see despite the crushing pressure and absence of light. And I wasn't alone. They were watching me, waiting. I could feel their hunger, their patience. They had been there for a very long time, and they would wait a while longer for me, for all of us who carried the blood. A voice spoke, though not in words. It resonated in my bones, in the water around me, ancient and terrible and somehow familiar. Come home, Elias. The tide is turning. The pact must be honored. I woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in bed. My heart was pounding as I tried to shake off the lingering dread of the nightmare. It was just a dream brought on by the stress of the past few weeks and the disturbing letters I'd been reading. Nothing more. But as I got out of bed and moved to the window, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Faint bluish marks had appeared overnight on my wrists. Shapes like crescent moons or fish scales, the same marks described in Robert's letter. I waited at the library for nearly an hour, but Martha never arrived to open it. When I tried calling the number listed on the door, there was no answer. It seemed my quest for answers had hit another dead end. I was considering my next move when I heard someone calling my name. Turning, I saw an elderly man approaching, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. He wore the weathered look of someone who had spent a lifetime at sea, tanned, creased skin, clear blue eyes that had squinted against the sun for decades. "You're Catherine's grandson," he said. It wasn't a question. "Martha called me last night, said you were asking questions about the Sullivans." His name was Michael Hargrove, and he had known my grandmother as a young man. They had been sweethearts briefly before she left town. "Martha won't be opening the library today," he said, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Or any day soon, I expect. She's gone to stay with her daughter in Portland. Packed up and left before dawn. Because of me? Because I was asking about my family?" Michael nodded slowly. "Folks in Blackwater Cove don't like to talk about the Sullivans. Bad luck, they say. Your grandmother was smart to get out when she did, smart to stay away." According to Michael, the Sullivan family had lived in Blackwater Cove for generations. They had been among the town's founders in the 1700s, wealthy shipbuilders who prospered even as other families struggled. But their success had come with whispers, rumors of dark bargains and unnatural luck. Every generation, the Sullivans lost people to the sea, Michael explained. Children mostly. They'd go missing usually around their 16th birthday. The family would mourn then carry on. It became a pattern almost expected. One child from each family branch claimed by the water. But in the spring of 1972, something changed. Thomas Sullivan, your great-grandfather, had died the previous winter without him. Michael hesitated as if choosing his words carefully. Without him to maintain the balance, I suppose you might say the pattern broke. Instead of taking just one, the sea came for them all. What do you mean? The sea came for them? People don't just disappear en masse because of some family curse. Michael turned to look directly at me. His expression was grave. Don't they? 12 Sullivan family members disappeared from Blackwater Cove on March 15, 1972. No bodies ever found. The Coast Guard called it a boating accident. Said they must have all gone out on Thomas's old yacht for some kind of family reunion. But there was no yacht in the harbor that day. No storm, nothing to explain it. And it wasn't just here, Michael continued. News came in the following days from all over. Sullivan relatives who had moved away to Boston, to New York, to Chicago, and beyond, all gone on the same day. Some left notes, some just vanished from locked rooms. The only ones who survived were those who had broken with the family completely. Your grandmother was one of the few. I showed Michael my wrists where the bluish marks had grown more pronounced. And these? Do you know what these mean? Michael's face paled as he saw the marks. Christ Almighty. He made the sign of the cross. They're calling you just like they called the others. Michael had agreed to show me the tide pool, the place mentioned in Elizabeth's letter where Thomas Sullivan had allegedly conducted some kind of ceremony with his children. I wasn't sure what I expected to find there, but it felt important. A piece of the puzzle I needed to understand. Your grandmother never told you anything about this place? Michael asked as we climbed the steep path toward the cliffs. I shook my head. She told me stories about the cliffs, but nothing personal. Nothing about her family or whatever this is. Michael nodded grimly. She was protecting you the same way she protected your mother, by keeping you away from Blackwater Cove. Away from the water. We reached the top of the cliff. The view was spectacular. The entire bay spread out below, the town of Blackwater Cove looking tiny and vulnerable against the vastness of the Atlantic. There, Michael pointed to a secluded inlet, almost hidden from view. That's where the tide pool is. The locals call it Sullivan's Folly, been avoided for generations. I need to see it. Michael shook his head, taking a step back. I won't go down there. Not for all the gold in the world, but I can't stop you, I suppose. Just be careful. And if you hear voices in the water, if anything calls your name, for God's sake, don't answer. The descent was treacherous, the path clearly long neglected. In places, I had to scramble on all fours, clinging to roots and rocks to keep from sliding down the sheer drop to the rocks below. But something drove me forward, a need to know, to understand what had happened to my family, what might be happening to me. The tide was out, revealing a series of pools among the rocks. Most were ordinary shallow depressions filled with seawater, home to stranded minnows and sea anemones. But one set farther back in a shadowy recess beneath the cliff was different. It was perfectly circular. The water within unnaturally still and dark, almost black. Around the edge of the pool were arranged 7 stones, each about the size of a human skull, each a deep obsidian black that seemed to absorb the light around it. They were carved with symbols I didn't recognize, spirals and wave patterns and what looked like ancient runes. I don't know how long I knelt there trying to see beyond the surface of that dark water. Minutes, maybe hours. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the beach. The tide would be coming in soon. As I stared into the pool, my reflection began to change, my features shifting into those of other people. A woman who looked like an older version of my mother. A young man with eyes just like mine. An elderly man with a stern expression. Faces of relatives I had never known. People whose blood I shared. People who had disappeared on March 15, 1972. The marks on my wrists were burning now. A cold fire that spread up my arms. I could hear whispers coming from the pool. Not quite voices, but something trying to form words, calling me, welcoming me, hungry for me. My fingertips hovered just above the surface of the water. Elias. I startled, looking up to see Michael at the top of the cliff path, waving frantically. The tide's coming in. You need to get out of there now. The strip of pebbles had already narrowed considerably as the sea reclaimed the land. I had to move quickly. I scrambled to my feet, suddenly aware of the danger. The path I had taken down would be underwater within minutes. I had to move quickly, but as I ran, something caught my eye. A flash of white among the rocks. I paused just for a moment and saw that it was paper. A letter protected from the elements inside a glass bottle wedged between 2 rocks just above the high tide line. I reached for the bottle, hesitated, then grabbed it, and continued to run. I made it back to the path just as the first waves began to crash against the cliff face. The climb up was even more dangerous than the descent had been, loose stones slipping beneath my feet, the spray from the waves making the rock slick and treacherous. Michael helped me to my feet when I finally pulled myself over the edge of the cliff, collapsing onto the grass, gasping for breath. "Did you touch the water?" he demanded. "Did you put your hand in the pool?" I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. "No, almost, but no." "What's that? What did you find down there?" With trembling hands, I extracted the letter from the bottle. The paper was old, but well preserved, protected from the elements by its glass container. The handwriting was immediately familiar, the same neat script I'd seen in Gran's journal. To whoever finds this, my name is Catherine Sullivan Webb. I was born in Blackwater Cove in 1936 and I should have died here on March 15, 1972 along with the rest of my family. That I did not is both my salvation and my eternal guilt. The Sullivan family has carried a curse for generations. In 1742, my ancestor James Sullivan made a pact with something that dwells in the deep, something ancient and hungry. In exchange for prosperity, for ships that never sank, and nets that always came back full, he promised a tithe. Every generation, the sea would claim one child from each branch of the family. For over 200 years, the pact was honored. The chosen ones would begin to dream of the water. Marks would appear on their skin. And when the calling came, they would walk into the sea, never to return. My father, Thomas Sullivan, was the keeper of the pact in his generation. It was he who performed the ceremony at the tide pool, binding each of his children to the ancient promise. I was 16 when he took me there, placed my hands on the black stones, and recited the words that would mark me as belonging to the sea. But I fought it. When the dreams began, when the marks appeared, I ran. I changed my name. I married a man who had never seen the ocean, who had spent his life in the mountains of Vermont. I thought distance would save me. I thought love would be enough. For a time it was. The dreams faded. The marks vanished. I had a daughter and I made sure she never knew of her heritage. Never set foot in the ocean. Never heard the name Sullivan. But the sea is patient and the debt remains unpaid. When my father died in the winter of 1972, the balance was broken. Without a keeper to maintain the pact, to ensure that only the promised tithe was taken, the hunger of the deep grew unchecked. It called to all who carried Sullivan blood, no matter how far they had run. All except me. I don't know why I was spared. Perhaps because I had truly broken the connection through years of denial and distance. Perhaps because I had passed the burden to my daughter, though unknowingly. Or perhaps I was left as a witness to carry the guilt of survival. I write this letter as a warning. The Sullivan line continues through me, through my daughter, and someday perhaps through her children. The sea has not forgotten us. The debt has not been paid. If you are reading this and you carry Sullivan blood, beware the water. Beware the dreams. Beware the marks upon your skin. The pact endures and the deep is ever hungry. May God forgive me for what I've done, for what I've hidden, for what I've passed on. Catherine Sullivan Webb, March 15, 1973. She knew, I whispered. All this time, she knew what had happened to them, why they disappeared, and she never said a word. She was protecting you and your mother, the only way she knew how. The marks on my wrists had grown darker, more defined. Clearly visible patterns like scales or crescent moons. But it didn't work, did it? The curse found me anyway. Michael's expression was grim. The ocean always collects its debts, Elias. One way or another. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dark water of the tide pool. Felt the pull of whatever lurked in its depths. The marks on my wrists had spread up my arms, tracing delicate patterns along my veins, like frost on a window, like seaweed in a current. I called my mother, needing to understand more about our family's relationship with water. Did you ever swim in the ocean as a child? Did Gran ever take you to the beach? What kind of question is that? You know how your grandmother felt about the water. She wouldn't even let me take baths as a child, only quick showers. She hesitated. There was more to it, a fear. She used to have nightmares about drowning. Would wake up screaming about the water taking her. And you? Do you like the water, swimming pools, lakes, the ocean? My mother's laugh was uneasy. I never learned to swim. Never wanted to. Just the thought of being underwater, not being able to breathe. She shuddered. Why are you asking all this? What's going on? Just trying to understand some things about about our family. Your grandmother had her secrets, Elias. Maybe it's best to let them stay buried. The marks had spread to my neck now, delicate lines etching their way up toward my face. In the dim light, they almost seemed to glow with a faint bluish luminescence, like bioluminescent algae, like the eyes of the figures in my dream. There had to be a way to break the curse. Gran had done it somehow. She had escaped the fate that had claimed the rest of her family. If I could figure out how, maybe I could save myself. In the journal, Gran had written, "The pact requires Sullivan blood, but bloodlines can be broken." What did that mean? How did one break a bloodline? Gran left Blackwater Cove. She changed her name. She married someone from far away, someone with no connection to the sea. But that took years. I didn't have years. These marks were spreading by the hour. There was one person who might know more. Someone who had witnessed the aftermath of the 1972 disappearances firsthand. Someone who had loved my grandmother enough to keep her secrets all these years. Michael looked unsurprised to see me at his door early the next morning, as if he had been expecting my visit. His eyes widened when he saw the marks now visible on my neck and jawline. "It's happening faster than I thought," he said, ushering me inside. "The sea is eager for Sullivan blood after all these years." "I need to know how to stop it," I said without preamble. Gran found a way. She wrote in her journal that bloodlines can be broken. What did she mean? "Your grandmother paid a terrible price for her freedom, Elias. Are you sure you want to know?" "I don't have a choice. The marks are spreading. The dreams are getting worse. I can hear them now, even when I'm awake. Voices in the water calling my name." Michael moved to a cabinet, removing an old wooden box. Catherine came to me after everyone disappeared. She was terrified, convinced she would be next. The marks had appeared on her skin just like yours. The dreams had started. She knew what was coming. He opened the box, revealing an old knife with an intricately carved bone handle. "The Sullivan Pact is a blood pact. It requires Sullivan blood to continue. Your grandmother reasoned that if she altered her blood somehow, the pact might no longer recognize her as a Sullivan." "Altered her blood? How?" "She asked me to perform an old sailor's ritual. A blood brother ceremony, but in reverse. To mix her blood with mine, to dilute the Sullivan line within her veins." "Did it work?" I asked softly. Michael nodded slowly. The marks faded within hours. The dreams stopped. She was free. His gaze dropped to the knife. "But such rituals have consequences. She could never return to Blackwater Cove after that, not for more than a day or two. She could never swim in the ocean again, and she passed the burden to her descendants, to your mother and to you. So, I need to mix my blood with someone else's, someone not connected to the Sullivan line." Michael shook his head. "It's not that simple. The ritual requires more than just blood. It requires sacrifice. Your grandmother gave up her connection to this place, to the sea. She gave up part of who she was." He hesitated. "And there was something else, something she never told you or your mother. Catherine was pregnant when she came to me that day. Early, just a few weeks along. Her husband, your grandfather, was the father. But after the ritual..." He swallowed hard. "The baby didn't survive. The sea took something from her. Even as she broke free of its claim. I would have had an aunt or uncle," I whispered, my voice breaking. "A family." Michael nodded grimly. "The sea always collects its debt one way or another. Your grandmother escaped with her life, but not without loss. And now I have to make the same choice." I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dark water of the tide pool. Felt the pull of whatever lurked in its depths. The marks had spread across most of my body now. Intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the waves below. The voices in my head had grown louder, more insistent, calling me home, promising reunion with the family I had never known, demanding payment of the ancient debt. I understood now why Gran had hidden the truth all these years, why she had erased the Sullivan name from our family history, kept my mother away from the ocean, told me stories about the cliffs and the sea that never included her own experiences. She had been trying to protect us from our inheritance, from the price her family had paid for generations of prosperity, from the hunger of the deep. But I wasn't going to run as she had. I wasn't going to pass this burden to future generations, to children I might someday have. The cycle had to end here and now. The tide was coming in again, the narrow strip of beach already half submerged as I made my way down the cliff path toward the tide pool. I would have to be quick. I knelt beside the pool, placing Gran's journal and the letter on one of the black stones. Evidence of what had happened. Proof that the Sullivan family had existed, had loved, had tried to escape their fate. Michael had offered to perform the blood ritual to help me break the curse as Gran had done, but I had refused. There had been too much loss already, too many secrets, too much pain passed down through generations. I am Elias Webb, I whispered to the water. Grandson of Catherine Sullivan, the last of the Sullivan line. I've come to break the pact. As my fingertips touched the water, the world around me seemed to shift and blur. The whispers in my head coalesced into a single voice. Ancient, powerful, hungry. Blood to water, flesh to salt, soul to depths, it intoned. The pact endures. Not anymore. From my pocket, I withdrew the knife Michael had given me, the same one used in the ritual that had freed Gran from the curse. But I had no intention of using it to mix my blood with another's. I had a different plan. I sliced my palm, letting drops of blood fall into the tide pool. I give you Sullivan blood freely, I said, my voice growing stronger. The blood of the last Sullivan. I give it not as payment, but as ending. The water began to roil and churn. The darkness within it shifting like something alive, reaching up toward the blood. The marks on my skin burned cold. A pain so intense I nearly blacked out. With this blood, I dissolved the pact made by James Sullivan in 1742. No more tithes, no more sacrifices, no more children claimed by the deep. The black stones around the pool began to crack. Lines spreading across their surfaces like ice breaking. The Sullivan line ends with me. There will be no more Sullivan blood for you to claim. No more descendants to hunt. The marks on my skin began to fade, the patterns breaking apart, dissolving like ink in water. The voice in my head screamed in rage and hunger. A sound that seemed to come from the depths of the earth itself. The water in the tide pool boiled and frothed. Dark tendrils reaching up toward me. It's over, I whispered. Let them go. Let them rest. Let it end. A massive wave crashed against the cliff, sending spray high into the air. For a moment, I thought I saw faces in the water. Dozens of them, men and women of all ages, their features echoes of my own. My lost family watching, waiting. The black stones shattered simultaneously, fragments scattering across the beach. The tide pool collapsed in on itself, the dark water draining away into the earth, leaving nothing but a shallow depression in the rock. The marks on my skin had vanished completely, taking with them the cold burn, the whispers, the pull of the deep. It was done. The pact was broken. Not through escape or evasion, as Gran had attempted, but through ending. The Sullivan line would die with me. Not because I wouldn't have children, but because those children would be free of the curse, free of the debt, free of the ancient hunger that had claimed so many of my ancestors. 3 months have passed since my visit to Blackwater Cove. The marks haven't returned. The dreams have stopped. Whatever connection had existed between me and the thing in the deep has been severed completely. I decided not to sell Gran's house after all. It was part of my heritage, part of the story I was only now beginning to understand. And someone needed to remember the Sullivan family, their lives, their struggles, their ultimate fate. Michael had helped me research the family history, filling in the gaps that Grant's journal had left. The Sullivans had indeed been one of the founding families of Blackwater Cove, wealthy beyond their neighbors, seemingly blessed with extraordinary luck until children began to disappear. Generation after generation, the pattern had continued. Prosperity and success paid for with the blood of their children until 1972, when the balance had broken and the sea had come to collect its debt in full. I will keep their memory alive. These relatives I never knew. I will preserve their letters, their stories, their warnings, not out of fear, but out of respect, out of love for the family that had been taken from me before I was born. The curse is broken. The pact dissolved. The hungry thing in the deep will claim no more Sullivan blood. But the ocean will always be there, vast and powerful and mysterious. A reminder of what my family had gained and what they had lost. My name is Elias Webb, grandson of Catherine Sullivan, the last to carry the blood of a family bound by an ancient promise. The first to be truly free of its price. Letters I found from relatives I never knew. All postmarked from the same day. They led me to a truth my grandmother tried to protect me from, a legacy I never asked for, a curse I had to break. But they also gave me something I hadn't expected, a connection to the past, a family history, a story that, however dark, was mine to inherit, mine to understand, and ultimately mine to end. The ocean still calls to me sometimes in dreams, but it's different now. Not a hungry, desperate summoning, but the gentle pull all humans feel toward the vast waters from which life emerged. A connection, not a claim. I am Elias Webb, and I am free.